All right, welcome back. This is the 4th episode of I Lost My Faith, and all I got was this podcast. I did it right this time.
Did it.
I said it right. Okay, I am Micah Herrera, and this is
George Alexander.
George Winifred Alexander.
Do we want to talk about that video? Like,
Yes, there we go. That would be a great starting point.
The video
for
we
me.
shared.
Okay.
Recently, that was making its efforts to describe the science behind Jesus.
So
right?
you were sent this video by someone in the Mormon church just this last week.
Recently, I'm not exactly sure.
Okay.
I didn't jump on watching it, so I'm not sure when I.
And this video is this preacher is a famous preacher in the Mormon church.
I didn't pay attention to who.
Okay,
so
okay.
I'm not sure.
But it's this video that goes around and it has this dramatic music in the background while he's giving this sermon about what the atonement means. What atonement means.
The atonement. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Now,
and it's framed as a scientific explanation of
because
why
it was sent to
necessary.
you. So it was sent to you as a scientific based video.
Like, right. The idea is like this is like this video is going to explain scientifically why Jesus was necessary.
Yes. Right. And then it ended up being what we're talking about right now. What I'm trying to articulate is that this string of nonsense that it seems like he didn't even finish a full thought before he'd go on to something else.
Right.
And so it was really just a bunch of charismatic smooth talking.
If you can call it charismatic, I didn't find it that that
well,
compelling.
I found he was smooth talker. He was a smooth talker. I would say, and again, this is that idea, and I've witnessed this so many times that people do, and it's kind of like it's what I call. I know that these are very intense ways of saying this, I guess, or whatever, or volatile phrases, a way of saying this, but it's kind of it's kind of a mental masturbation. It's kind of like stroking someone.
Okay.
It's this, if I can just turn a phrase that sounds really smart and sounds really smooth and cool, then you're going to think that I'm smart and you're going to go, ooh, that's so nice. Ooh, that must be true. Ooh, that just makes me feel so emotional and I believe it.
Right. And I think going back to some of the conversations we've had a little bit, the difference between maybe Mormonism and the evangelical world you grew up in, another part of that is the fact that he has elder in front of his name, right?
Okay.
The fact
so
that he
automatically has
a
authority.
leader of the church,
yes.
Whatever he says is going to be the most profound
it's thing
you've
revered.
ever heard, right? Because we're so blessed to have prophets on the earth today. Anything they say is just so important.
Yeah. And if you don't understand it, if it doesn't make any sense, that's just because you don't understand how intricate God's word is.
Or you're not following the commandments well enough, the president of the church, his name's Russell Nelson, a few years back, right after Haley and I decided to leave the church, had this big talk about lazy learners and how people who don't take the time to learn are the people that are leaving the church and all this kind of stuff. You have all sorts of different ways that really dodge around points, right? Which is what I saw in that video, because I was really trying. I was like, what is the point being made, right? What is the scientific claim? Spoiler alert, we can't tell you. There wasn't one, right? Ultimately. But I was really trying. I was like, what are the threads? What are being connected? You could listen
to that. No, it had no point.
There was one point in it near the end where he said something which I thought was very, I'd have to find it and make sure that I'm remembering this correctly. But I thought it was very illustrative of what was happening. He was like, okay, now I'm going to tell you why scientifically your part in it is so important. Your part in the atonement is so important. I'm going to tell you scientifically.
Yeah.
He says that phrase. I'm going to tell you right now. Yeah. And then he kind of sidesteps and just says, our Father in heaven loves us so much. Jesus says,
proceeds to give no scientific anything.
Does this Jesus hand trick really quick, and then goes back and says, And that is why you have to repent, right?
Oh, he did talk about the molecular makeup of water, being H2O.
Yes.
Which was so, oh man. It was so, the way he got into that. And we may have to link the video or something so you can judge it for yourself. But it was just sprinkling a little scientific fact that water is H2O to make his point. Other than that, it had no connection to what he was talking about.
No, and I think when he ultimately like connected the science to the God, like he did that in such like a quick way that sure, you outlined very basic science that is right, that has been studied and all this
stuff. That water is H2O.
Right. And then all of a sudden it was like, but God created things smaller than atoms called intelligences. And it's like, hold up, man. No.
Okay,
That's,
where's the proof on that?
Right. Like you
where do we see that?
Tell science and then skip and add something.
Sure.
And then
which is something that they do.
It.
Yes.
Right.
So, but it's the whole I hit you with a scientific fact. So I am smart. So just believe me when I don't back up this next thing that I say. For sure. It is a bait and switch. It's a bait and switch. It's often used.
I bet that video would have hit so fucking hard for me. Because especially near the end, like there's this book called Jesus the Christ. It was like a really big like when you go on your missions, there's only certain books you can have, of course, like the scriptures, but then like there's a few extra ones that are like
you're only allowed to have approved. A few books.
And this is one that was written by a guy that was an apostle. He's since died, and Talmage, I think, is his last name. I can't remember the first. And he was like given permission to write this book like in the temple, and that was like a big thing. Like he wrote this like really expansive story of like Christ's book, cross-referencing all this stuff. In that, it had a story, or it had like a cross-reference footnote talking about Jesus turning water into wine, and talked about like pretty much what he said at the time was that no miracle is like unexplainable by science. Like eventually we'll be able to understand because God works within scientific like standards. Right.
Okay. And that's so there's really no need for God.
I mean, that's where you'd go, but like that's how I like viewed things for a long time. It's like it's scientific, and that's how I got around evolution, because like it doesn't fit right now, but it has to because it's science, right? So I was like doing all this thing. So I thought that's what that video would more so be. I think ultimately it didn't. I didn't think it did that.
No,
it didn't, because then it just was like, see, Jesus does this because science is God, but like I'm not going to tell you how.
Yeah,
of course, that's what the other guy did too.
Somewhere in there, which is something I don't know. Is that something that they teach about in the Mormon Church?
I'd never heard any of what that was. That was some weird
made up thing.
Yeah. Here's the thing: they make them do general conference twice a year, right?
Okay.
Which is supposed to be like this big, like enlightening.
So he's one of the prophets.
This is one of the.
Okay, if he is one of the prophets, this is one of 12 or 14.
There's 15 total. 12 apostles and then 3 in the first presidency.
Okay, and these are at the top. These lead the church.
At
a time. And when do they not become a prophet anymore, or when do they get switched out? Just when they die. How did they get anointed?
By schmoozing and being rich in the church. I mean, there's no really, I don't know any other way.
Yeah.
I mean, enlightenment and calling, but that's how.
What would they say is the way that they get up there?
Get called by God. There's no other, but it's schmoozing and being rich.
Because that's a big deal in the Mormon church, is being rich.
Yeah, it just helps. But I'm going back, like they do general conference twice a year, which is supposed to be like a very enlightening, like God's prophet speaking to the people. They've run out of things to say, in my opinion. They don't have anything to say, and so that's why they're always like tearing it back of like, all that matters is faith, baptism, and repentance. But then we're just going to tell you like a million different stories to illustrate that. So like this guy, he just had run out of things to say, I think. It's like it didn't make any sense.
I think that's where I've gone through by listening to apologists for so many years now. Apologist is someone who defends a faith. So a Christian apologist would be a defender, someone who defends a faith against non-believers or non-belief attempts to prove the faith, in whatever way.
Right.
Whether it be logical, through the sciences, through emotion, through archaeological, which which they haven't been able to do either.
No.
That's one of the things that Christopher Hitchens brought up that I really loved. He said they gave Israel, they said, go and find your birthright. Go and find where the Israelites that in the Old Testament were supposedly slaves, where they had come to the promised land. Go find. They allowed them to archaeologically dig all over Egypt to try and find it. They found nothing. They found nothing. They said, you have the keys, go find it. And they found nothing.
Right.
Yeah.
What was so I guess bringing it back more to like your individual experience. So I know when you go to your cabin, you read your book. One question I wanted to ask you, did you ever consider like other churches? Was that ever like something like after like a progressive church? Because I know like ultimately when they started, like one of the breakaways was like that video you talked about Jack Black and like the evil they talked about with Prop 8, all that stuff. Was there ever a period for you of like because I know those exist, right? Like more LGBTQ friendly. Like, was that ever a thing for you?
I thought about it.
Yeah.
I did. I had been to so many churches, and I even during that time I went to some in California. The thing is that it wasn't the churches that I cared about. It was the actual Bible and the actual religion that I cared whether or not it was true, and also I cared about what it was saying. And I went through. There were years, because between 18 when I looked in the mirror and I said I'm gay,
right,
and 22, 23ish when I said I don't believe anymore. I said I don't believe in this God anymore. I went through all of the Bible doesn't actually say that homosexuality is a sin. It actually uses a different word. Homosexuality wasn't even a word back then. It meant different things. So in the Bible, it actually meant pedophilia, or it meant something else, or it meant something, whatever.
Yeah.
So there are Christian gay people who say, or just progressive Christians that say, the Bible doesn't actually condemn sin. I mean, condemn homosexuality. But then also the Bible condones slavery. The God of the Old Testament commits genocide.
He's wild. Yeah, he's out of control.
Is fine with killing everyone and children and animals, all of a different tribe, or if they're virgins, take those and basically rape them as your wives, take them as your wives, and force them into marriage, force them into making children for you. It's disgusting, absolutely disgusting. There was if a woman is pregnant and she's accused of adultery, there's this ceremony in the Old Testament where they would give her basically sewage water, is what they found out that it was. And if she lived or didn't miscarry, then she was not in sin and it was his baby. If she miscarried or died, then it was not his baby. That's the kind of crazy Bronze Age ideas of what a God would do. That's in the Old Testament. You can read that in the Bible. There is the whole misogyny that still is very strong in the Christian church, that women are not allowed to preach, or they need to be quiet, or they're subservient to men. Of course, that's the whole thing in the Bible, right? Women came from Adam's rib. They are servants. God gave Adam someone to serve him. It's God. Then the man is the head of the household, and then the woman and children. I can't. So you can give me all these. Well, maybe homosexuality isn't explicitly talked about in the Bible, but all these other things are.
There's so many
yeah,
ifs and buts and
but it's
dancing
so
you have to do.
Blatantly human. It's so blatantly made up by humans.
Right.
And that's the part that got me, is that it wouldn't have mattered what a progressive church says. It's still a human made up religion.
Right.
It's a human God.
Yeah.
And that's what I found out, is this type of, all of these religions are just coming from the heads of humans. And to your point, you said that the wisdom of God is available within you, and you don't exactly have to go to God for that. That's the point. Yeah, because it came from human minds. Right. And then, and so you have that power. Yeah, sure. And so I went into, a way you can say that is you are God.
For sure.
If you want to be really heretical and sacrilegious and irreverent, which I love to be, I am God. But I'm not God over other people. I am just as powerful as the God of the Bible, because the God of the Bible was made up by other sacks of meat.
Sacks of meat. What, from like a psychological day-to-day decision making, like what were maybe like the bumps for you in like that realm when you came to that decision or came to that spot of like unbelief, right?
Yeah.
Like going back to some of like the conversation in the beginning about, now, you grew up in this space where you could channel this omnipotent, all-knowing, all-loving being, right? And that spirit, maybe that's how you make decisions. That's how you do all these different things. But then you don't believe in that anymore, but you still have to make decisions. You still need to decide like what your future is going to be, what you care about. What do you do that? Do you remember like what that experience was like, or like any like specific bumps along that road, if there were?
Well, you mean just like how to decide what I was going to do after that, or how I was going to decide?
I have an example.
Okay. Give me an example. Yeah.
For me, just like being certain about things, like that basic of a thing was so uncomfortable after leaving the church, because Mormonism like was so, I don't know, the term might be like unearned certainty. Right. It was just because we were taught to say, I know things that I didn't know. Right. I was taught from a very young age to say, I know the church is true. I know Joseph Smith's prophet. I know these things. Yeah. I go on my mission, and I was explicitly taught bearing testimony is how you build testimony. So how you know things is by saying that you know them. Right. And so
the Bible's true because the Bible says it's true.
Exactly. Right. And the more you go out and you teach these people and you tell them that it's true, the more you'll believe it. Really, is what they said. Right. So certainty for me after that, I felt very. Of course, I'd lost my whole worldview, all these things, but just like being certain about things was something that was really hard for me to kind of wrap my head around, of like, where do I, how can I do that? Or like, how do I actually earn that? How do I earn that sense? Cause I wasn't taught to, maybe like that might be it. Yeah. And so, I think ultimately I've learned, cause I think myself as a person, I'm an open-minded person, and so I've learned how to kind of traverse that in a way to, maybe I don't have to always make up my mind, or I can do make up my mind for now.
I don't know is okay.
I don't know is okay. I know as much as I know based on what I know is okay.
Yes, you have to. So I agree. So we kind of talked about this last time, that I had to reassess everything in my life, because this is such a big lie that I had believed for so long. Everything had to be re-examined, because it all could have been wrong. Right. Everything that I thought about life or love or relationships or anything, or what I'm supposed to do with my life, what it means to be human, all these things. And the way that I did that was I needed to get off of this. I needed to learn how to not be manipulated by false logic, by emotional manipulation type of logic, because that is one thing that the church had taught me to do, was just to not really know how to decipher. And this is something that I would warn a lot of people that may still be in the church or coming out of it. You may not know how to not be fooled very easily, because the whole church belief system is based on faith and vibes and emotion, and you're taught to believe authority, not what's true, but what's authoritative. The Bible is true because it's God's word, because it says it's true.
Right.
We don't have to back that up because it's from God. So there's the authority. You don't even have to look into it. You don't need to look into where the Bible came from, who wrote it, all that stuff. It's God's word.
Right.
So you need to believe it. And the pastor has a direct line to God, so you need to believe the pastor, or you need to believe this big whatever, this person, this authority. So believing on authority was something that I had to get rid of very quickly. Believing on understanding how to construct a logical argument in life. So when I started looking into the sciences, I realized, oh no, I was just believing what people were telling me. One of the ways that I think you can really understand if you're being emotionally manipulated to believe something is if you're starting to feel really emotional when they're talking about it. Not like emotional, but emotional as in, and then they go, now believe me. Because I made you feel so emotional, now believe me. Which is what church sermons, what church sermons would do. A lot of the best preachers in the church, in the type of religion that I came from, it was all about how emotionally worked up can I get you, and then tell you to come down and commit your life to Jesus. And that is not, emotion is not a particular pathway to truth. Emotion is a good way to feel,
right?
But
called emotional reasoning.
Is that what it's called? Is that a thing? Okay.
There's a term from
Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Like cognitive behavioral therapy, one of the, what you're doing with cognitive behavioral therapy is looking at the way you're thinking, the way you're feeling, you're behaving, how those three things are interacting, and ultimately leading to like depression and those things, right? But within cognitive behavioral therapy, there are things called like faulty thinking, like different like common ways that we are kind of self-defeating with how we're thinking about things that lead us to feel either depressed, helpless, anxious, whatever it is. Yeah. And so emotional reasoning would be one of those, which is that very thing, right? Of like taking, I feel this thing, which means a truth, right? So I feel scared, so this thing is scary. Right?
Yes. Or I'm in danger because I feel scared, even if you're maybe not in danger.
You're not, right? Yes. So it's taking an emotion that you feel and meaning and assuming that it has to denote truth, which I agree with you. I think religion kind of manipulates that in a way by saying, like if you hear something and you feel a certain way, that means it's a truth. Right. Because then you can.
So in my religion, it was called your knower down in your gut. Your knower. Yes. That's the Holy Spirit talking to you.
Your knower. Okay.
Your emotional reaction is the Holy Spirit talking to you. That's how you know what's really true.
Right.
And what that's teaching you to do is bypass your logical brain.
Yes.
Which is very your logical brain is very useful in helping you actually determine what's going on in reality. It's something but it's one of the later parts of our evolution.
Exactly.
The thing is that Christianity or the religion can tend to hijack the older parts of your brain that are very driven by emotion.
Right.
And driven by that emotional short circuit that bypasses reason.
For sure.
And churches thrive on that. And they thrive on getting people, again, this is what the church service is for, is to get you into this heightened emotional state, this altered mind, hypnotic singing and submissive energy and this like I said, heightened emotional state, and then tell you feel all these good feelings. That's God. So now believe it. Believe
of course, that
it.
means that I'm a good. That what I say indefinitely is truth.
Is truth and right.
You should.
Yes.
So for you then, in like your experience of that, was there like a mistrusting of your emotions after?
Yes, I shut them off for a long time.
Yeah,
I had a hard time. It's one of the things that I've had to reclaim and learn how to be okay with.
Yeah.
I learned emotional control very quickly after I left the church. I had never really been taught emotional control because my emotional uncontrol was so useful in the church. Being a worship leader, getting people to join me in an emotional response and getting their heightened emotions going with music was my whole job.
Right.
Now, I saw it as connecting people with God, and it was a very holy thing and sacred thing, but really that's what I was doing.
Yeah.
And I talked about this when I talked about my story.
For sure.
But afterwards, I had to shut that off. I had to or I didn't have to. What I did was this trauma response
for sure.
of shutting off all emotion. And anytime an emotion would come up, I'd be like, no, I can't feel that. Shove it down.
Because somebody's going to take advantage of that? Was that the thought?
Yes, I can't trust my emotions. Okay. My emotions had led me astray. Right, had made me very vulnerable to believe things that weren't true, and this huge lie. And then my emotions had also messed up certain other parts of my life. They were just out of control. I'd never learned emotional intelligence and how to control my emotions.
Yeah, which is not taught in especially like a religious context. No, there's no emotional education. Maturity taught. Even like
absolutely.
I know we've had conversations off mic about the obsession with childlike faith and like the idea of like remaining childlike.
Yes, and not have it. Yes, and that would be unrestrained emotion or not understanding how to
modulate or respond to your emotions, because emotions are important, right?
Yes,
and there can be, I think, like messages that. Yeah, I think it goes back to also, I think, something we've talked about of like the idea of like the natural man, and that emotions are coming from you, so they can't be all that great because they're not coming from God, right? Like whether outspoken, that is a message.
The church is trying to tell you,
that your emotions can't necessarily be trusted. If your emotions are in line with like what the preacher's saying, right, with God, those emotions are fine. But any other that like takes you away from God, does any of this is
that does bring us to this book here. Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winell, and she talks about how the negative emotions, anger, is shameful, is put on or shamed.
Yes.
Negative emotions are shamed. You're only allowed to feel joy. You're only allowed to feel happiness. You're only allowed to feel elated happiness, and it is wild. The church that I came from, because I thought about this a lot. There was a lot of preaching about being childlike. Yeah. And she talks about this too. It's there in religion, and it's this idea that you are always a child to God. God is the eternal Father, the eternal totalitarian overlord Father that's always there, always ready to discipline if you need some discipline because he loves you. And you are a child playing in a sandbox, like I like to say. And this is not you never get to grow up and actually be an adult. And it's kind of revered. It's a little bit, it's very regressive.
Yeah.
Very limiting idea. I wanted to read some quotes from this.
Yes, for sure.
She has some really great stuff.
Yeah, and
here.
She's a clinician.
Yes.
She I think her website is called Leaving the Fold, or it might be her name. Either way, I'd recommend her a lot. She's someone that I've looked into quite a bit as I've started kind of.
Marlene Winell is incredible.
Yeah, she's great. So then she works with high demand religions. She herself grew up in a high demand Christian faith. Fundamentalist.
Yes,
she says,
it's very similar to kind of what I came from. This charismatic, Jesus was her lover type thing. That's very real where I come from too. Jesus is your lover.
Yeah.
And so she even talks about how awkward that is, thinking about her teen years, that Jesus was her lover.
Yeah.
And I can point you to people that are in the church that I came from that very much feel that way. There, yeah. And I felt that way. I've told you about, I've joked about that. I've joked about that very inappropriately before. Which I won't say here, but I have some good jokes about that. But yes, Jesus was my lover too.
For sure. Mm-hmm.
And yeah.
Let's hear the quotes.
That goes into the sexual repression as well.
Yes.
Which we'll have to talk about some more too. I want a whole episode on that. We hopefully in the future are going to have someone who's a friend of ours that has been through conversion therapy, which is not something that I've been through, but I probably want to talk about sexual repression during that, and we can talk about our journeys, all of our journeys with that through that time, because it's just I'm very it's a big part of my journey too. Sure. Obviously, with being gay, none of my sexual expression is celebrated in the church.
Right.
Being heterosexual man like you are, there is a certain avenue of sexuality that is celebrated in the church. It's narrow. But it's still there, validated, still at least validated.
Right.
Which I'm curious to get into that psyche too, what that's like for you, what the journey is. And then Haley as well.
We'll have a lot to talk about.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah.
We can psychoanalyze that one, because I really need some therapist insight on that one too. Okay. Honestly.
I'll do my best.
Okay. So some of these quotes may be a little all over the place topic wise, but they're definitely,
stood out to you?
Yeah, stood out to me, and we can kind of go one by one. I would just love to read them and kind of react to them. So, this is a good one. Okay, so here's this is a great place to start. This is the title of this paragraph is "Stifling of Independent Thought."
Yeah.
The fundamentalist belief system is one that purports to have all the answers. It also claims to be the only way. All deviations lead to hell.
Yep.
This is true of where I come from. Same for you. It follows then that parents who believe this would be very concerned about what their children believe. Any alternative ways of thinking about major life questions would be highly threatening. Consequently, the fundamentalist household rarely encourages children to explore their own thoughts, to be open-minded about ideas, or to come to their own conclusions. This is very true of pastors and authorities in churches as well. My mentor or people that were teaching me, maybe not my parents so much, but people that were teaching me within the church, same way, replace parents with pastors as well.
Yeah.
In fact, fundamentalist pastors, are typically vocal in their opposition to the teaching of critical thinking skills or values clarification in schools. Anti-intellectualism is very strong.
Yes.
In the most reasonable cases, parents have a real and loving concern for the ultimate safety of their children, of course. Mom wants you to go to heaven with her.
Right.
In the worst cases, parents use this system to avoid any dialogue with children. I don't know, go pray to God, he'll give you the answers. Insecure people have a difficult time listening to disagreements from their children, much less encouraging their right to form opinions. In authoritarian families, children grow up resentful and they learn to conform in order to get approval. They often have difficulty forming and expressing personal opinions later in life. So, and then this leads to feeling shame about or saying, or not having a confidence in your own self.
And exploring, and even just, I think even like with my own experience related to that, I think that was one of the things that ultimately pushed me away, is coming to awareness of the idea that any exploration was to find answers that were already there that I just had to conform with. Ultimately, right? Like there's a lot you can study. There's a lot of Bible to read. There's a lot of all this stuff, but ultimately you have to come to the same conclusions.
Right.
And I felt very stifled by that.
Right.
And I think stepping away, the scary piece of that was the part that you read up front, right? Of like that, this is the one truth. This is the one idea. Anything else is not only wrong, but evil and bad and going to lead you elsewhere. But ultimately, I think for like a, bright spot down the road. Like the feeling of having unrestrained intellectual exploration of ideas and like perspectives for me has been probably one of the best parts of leaving faith.
Yeah,
right. Is
absolutely.
to be able to just like look at like different perspectives on ideas and not have to like be like, oh, I feel so icky because like this is evil. Like, I'm reading this evil thing. But like I can just like read this idea and be like, I don't agree with that, but like I'm glad I know that. Whatever.
Absolutely,
you know what I mean?
Absolutely. For me, deconstruction was learning how to go through my day-to-day life and not having this undercurrent of feeling icky about being human.
Yes. Feeling gross all the time.
And feeling shame about being a human being.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And when you do that, when you stop doing that and stop being reactionary and you look back, you step back, you can actually make yourself into someone that you love and that you care about. You can love yourself for who you are. And then also there's this thing that I realized, that this whole shaming yourself for quote unquote sin, things that you do wrong, it never really helped make anything better. Once I learned to just accept myself and accept who I am and love myself, that's when I actually got better.
Right.
That's when I actually started changing my ways into something that I thought, this is what I feel is the right way to act. This is what I feel is good, a good way to live my life. But the whole time I was in the church, and I saw this with other people too, because there's this facade of joy and happiness. There's this, we're always happy. God is joy. God is love. And there's this hiding away of anything that's seen as sin or wrong or negative and put into a corner. And this is the toxic thing that I want to drive home, that I felt. I was so strongly revealed to me that when you push those negative things, or what you see as negative, into a corner, and you repress it down, which is what religion teaches you to do, which is what you see the people in the religion doing, because nobody can know that anything's wrong or it's shameful. No one can see my sin.
Because unfortunately, everyone's still human there, whether they want you to be or not.
And especially people in authority figures and the pastors, what I was seeing was that they're not just people, they're people with power. Yeah, they're people with, so they can't be flawed. Or at least they see, if anybody sees my flaws, then they're not going to trust me and they're not going to listen to me. And the more that they repress those things, the more I saw the monster grow from that corner and come out. And I saw this very strongly in certain ones, that I would see all their intentions would be good. But because that monster was coming out of there, their actions would harm people. And part of that was not being able to control understand their own emotions and their own emotions. Other part was their unwillingness to look into what they considered the darkness within themselves and face it.
Yeah.
Instead, it was God washed me clean of all of that. If I pray this prayer, God forgives me and washes me clean of all that. I don't even have to face it or look at it.
Right. It can lead to like a lot of
excuse me. Go ahead.
Just like excusing things, mindlessness, rather than like an intentional like effort to, because you
understand
and improve,
and
I think and it can stem from ideas about how unimportant this life is compared to the other, about all these different, I think like the truly harmful ideas that I think lead to a lot of people doing dangerous things or just like living such unfulfilled lives, or
unexamined lives, unthoughtful, unmindful. I don't know if that's a word, unmindful, but
anti-mindful.
Yes.
It's
this, because I don't need to discover myself. I need to just push myself down and fill up with Jesus.
Right. And I think that's a really big, like, going on the topic of deconstruction, reconstruction, people leaving the church, especially I think the messaging I received as a kid and like the image of people leaving the church were that they were losing all community, they were losing all morality, they were losing all this structure,
right.
Which I think, of course, like there's a period of re-examination, redefinition, but the idea that like religion has like a monopoly on like value and morality clarification and following, and that like secular people do not do that is just such bullshit, right? I think like the world and like the model we've been given has tried to to say that that like religion, you need religion, because I hear that all the time from family members, other people who are like, I just can't leave the church because of my kids.
Sure.
Right? They need something. This. I'm like, you can teach them those things. I promise you. You know what you believe.
Yes.
Like if you give yourself the chance, and you may have to put some work to define it outside of like these prophet stories that they give you that are supposed to like identify truth, faith, whatever. Like you can identify that and you can find ways to teach. I believe. Like, I don't have kids,
I don't need God to tell me not to murder to know that murder is wrong.
Right. Like I
don't need 100%. God to tell me not to lie to know that lying hurts people.
Yeah, and that's for me, like, going back to, like, the nihilism conversation we had, that piece, I can understand how you can look at, like, that nihilistic perspective, look into the void and be like, God damn, I need to believe in God. I can get that. I can, like, have empathy for the people that's why religion exists. Like,
Yeah, because it's scary out there, so I need the comfort.
Right, yes. But then the idea that, like, I need a religion because that's the only way to ensure that I have values and can give those to other people. I'm like, no, that I don't agree with. Because I think there are...
I don't need God to tell me other people are valuable to understand that other people are valuable.
Right, and I think like traditionally, like the idea is that like having mythos and like this, like these idea of gods allows like larger amounts of people to agree on things. Ultimately, I think from like a sociological perspective. Yeah,
social cohesive utility.
There has to be a different way. And there is.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I love Richard Dawkins talks about this, how you can even see it across history, and I've thought about this too. You can see it across history that morals have always been decided by human beings when they wrote the Bible. But even then, we've updated our morals since the Bible. There are plenty of things that are in the Bible that we are like, no, we don't do that anymore.
Put the stones down.
Slavery, stoning people. We're working on the misogyny here. Goodness, you'd think that we'd have gotten past it, but we have not.
Not quite.
But the othering of people, genocide. Yeah. We obviously think that those are wrong, but they're in the Bible. Right. Condoned by God. And so we update our ethics, our morals. I always think it's so ridiculous when apologists try and say, well, how do you get your morals if you don't have an objective morality? I'm sorry, I don't know how else to put this, but there is no objective morality. Right. Morality is a made-up human thing, first of all. Right. It's our way of...
We're socialized animals.
So, yeah. It's our way of coming together in a civilization and being around each other and living together and surviving together and thriving together. Right. Is part of morals and ethics. And so it's always subjective. We're always re-examining it. But there's this fear put into people that, well, if we just let people decide morals, well, then the psychos who think that killing is okay are the ones that are going to make it. And then everybody's just going to be murdering each other and everybody's going to be lying and stealing and fornicating and whatever else that they think is. But no, we've always as humans decided our laws decide what something that we all agree on, that we make an agreement socially on, and they change all the time about what is lawful, what is not. It's not only what's in the Bible, if we only went off of what's in the Bible, it'd be a very different world that we live in right now.
What?
So it's kind of an asinine thought to this objective morality and this fear that's put into people that if God's not there to make people behave, then people won't behave. Well, then I'm sorry, but you have a really low view of humanity, and maybe even a very low view of yourself, of who you are as a human. And if you need a God to tell you not to murder, you might need to examine your own self and figure out what's going on in there.
Yeah.
Before, don't put that on everybody else. Right. I want to read this next phrase because I thought it was really good. And the biblical attitude toward human feelings is one of great suspicion. Feelings like anger, jealousy, and fear, even though there's a jealous God, are condemned as of the flesh and the devil.
Yep.
Consequently, many Christians struggle with guilt when experiencing ordinary emotions.
Yeah.
There's little help from the church in understanding the function of these feelings, including sadness, which is shamed in the church too. Now, they might say, well, we don't shame when someone is sad, but it is because you're supposed to be happy. Right. Have joy because God's got everything worked out. You don't really need to be sad. It's
all his plan, all of it.
Right. So if you're actually sad, then you're not really understanding and believing enough. Yeah. In the family, feelings are more likely to be punished than heard. Conflict is considered sinful.
Yeah.
This is something that I grew up with. Instead of an opportunity for learning, yet feelings are inevitable, and without understanding or skill, they can be very painful to handle. Individuals can learn self-hatred for having feelings.
Right.
This is something that this book has been helping me through, that I grew up with. So I have felt like I learned to repress my feelings because I felt like I couldn't, like I was intruding on the space if I had feelings. So like this book has been really helping me understand that, oh my goodness, it's okay to put your feelings out there. It's okay to feel.
Right.
It's okay to put your feelings into the space. Obviously, if you're dominating the space all the time with your feelings, that's like you have to learn. You learn social, but to never, because I remember the first time I went to a therapist, the therapist I was talking for a while. We had been through a session or two, and I was thinking, oh man, I'm opening up so much. And she just goes, you have a lot of walls up. You're a very closed off person. And I thought, are you crazy? I've been spilling my guts to you for 2 sessions now, or so these many sessions now. Yeah. How can you say that to me? I feel like I've said more to you than I say to the people that are closest to me in my life. And it clicked. And I was like, oh my goodness, I can't even share my feelings with people around me. Not my genuine ones.
Right.
Because the church teaches you to put the facade on, not what you're really feeling, not how you're really feeling. You can't be real with people, because if you show humanity, then God's power is not really working through you, right? Yeah. Because you're just human. And that was so. I'm still trying to process that. I'm still trying to understand that. Yeah. I don't know. Have you ever? You seem like a person. I don't know. Y'all come from religion, and we relate.
Yeah.
I think we relate because we've felt similar about these things.
Right.
How do you feel about that?
What do you about
being able to put your emotions out there?
Yeah.
Now we're doing therapy session.
Yeah. So I think for sure. I think my experience of it, and I think because we're different temperamented people.
Yes.
I think we have a different experience of it.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I will say this if I can, and I don't want to put this on you.
Yeah, go for it.
I think to me, you seem like you came up in a very emotionally secure and stable environment in your family. I could be wrong about that, but that's the vibes I get from you specifically. So I'm curious if you've ever had any issues or felt like you haven't been able to express yourself emotionally or not.
I think I more have a difficulty with being in touch.
Oh, being in touch with them. Oh, okay.
Definitely like propensity towards numbness.
Yeah,
and defense and like depression. Like biologically and in my family. I think like environment wise, I didn't grow up in a chaotic environment.
Yeah.
A stable environment. I think, not, but like an emotionally guarded environment.
Not an emotionally guarded?
Emotionally
guarded. Okay. Emotionally guarding is
a lot of guarding, a lot of we don't have issues.
Yeah,
we do.
That's what I'm talking about. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah.
So I think for me, I didn't less the experience of like feeling that I couldn't express my emotions and like that I was like doing this, but just like that I don't know, like I felt just like disconnected from them.
Yeah.
So that's more what I go through. Like I have to make sure I am tuning in, because I am a very like I think I just have like a very even like baseline. Like I don't have like an up and down, a lot of up and down myself. But if I'm not careful, I can just like numb out and just like not be feeling anything, which is also like just not good.
That's not helpful.
Right. Not healthy, not helpful.
Yeah.
But I think like even like with like what that's saying like about anger, jealousy, all these things that like are just like I think she said in there like what they're actually like signaling, right? Like I think like emotions need to be viewed less as like things we need to resolve, because I think that's like when we think of like sadness, depression, anger, these like the
you just need to understand God's master plan better, or God's joy, or
it's something that just needs to be resolved, finished, but it's a signal. It's an evolutionary signal of something we need to either move toward or move away from. That's not how it's communicated. It's not, and especially with like anger, conflict, I think it said in there that conflict, instead of being used as viewed as an opportunity for learning, adjustment in a relationship, for a reestablishment of boundaries, for learning more about a partner or about a friend, like it's viewed as the devil's work, and so you never do it, and so you lose opportunities for intimacy, you lose opportunities for all these things. Just because you can't be angry, you can't have conflict. That's definitely something I think I experienced that in my childhood quite often, is we just did not have conflict, but I think we could have had a little bit more healthy conflict.
Amen. Well, I've got something to go right after that.
Here we go.
That goes right on from what you were just saying. It was perfect. Okay. This one says, since the entire fundamentalist system of thinking is absolutist in character, it is very threatening and often impossible for fundamentalist Christians to admit and examine areas of unhappiness in themselves.
Right.
This is very true. Problems or doubts are simply considered sin, and the Christian strives to be victorious. I've heard this preached. Well, it is in quotes in the book. Victorious. She puts it in quotes because that's what she means by it. There is no value placed on reflection or awareness of areas for personal growth. Thus, important emotional and behavioral issues are not examined, and the pattern of denial develops. Well, exactly what we're talking about. Troubling philosophical questions, feelings of unfulfillment, and unchristian, quote unquote, experiences such as anger or greed have to be denied, pushed into the corner. Hints of such feelings are quickly taken to God in prayer by the more conscientious, but in that process, they are essentially dismissed rather than dealt with. Jesus, just forgive me of this, wash it away, and they don't ever face it or deal with it. It's just, I'm not going to think about it until it pops up even bigger next time. All this becomes a fantasy that grows and must be protected, a fantasy that all is well. To fail to support this fantasy would be to question one's core reality. This would be it. If you show that you're human, then you are destroying the fantasy of that all is well, that God has me, that I'm on God's side, that I'm God's child, that I'm in God's blessing. And this can be overwhelming. The same process can happen in fundamentalist families. And so this happens, this generates, not only does this come from the leadership of the church, but it generates this culture of this.
Yes, for sure.
That all is well and it needs to stay well. And that's because our credibility is based on that.
For sure.
And it will crumble, so we have to keep up this fantasy. This system of fantasy is maintained by the pastors, parents, either, who must also believe that all is well. Problems which would appear blatant to the outside observer simply go unnoticed and consequently unaddressed.
Yeah.
Seen plenty of that, because these parents cannot admit any fault. Thus, the dynamic is not so much a willingness to neglect or abuse children, but an outright blindness to problems.
Yeah.
This kind of denial can be even more intense than what occurs in non-religious abusive families that are incapable of processing the truth. This is because the religious person would have to examine his or her foundations in order to admit imperfection. The whole worldview is based on this.
Yeah.
Values and assumptions about reality and the meaning of life would have to be assessed. If the family is hurting, then something must be seriously wrong. The spiritual system may be inadequate, since problems are considered spiritual rather than human. And if so, then God must be inadequate, and then all is lost. The resulting panic would be devastating. So denial is not only easier and less painful in this kind of belief system, but absolutely necessary, a matter of life and death. That is what I saw so clearly when I left religion, was this the power of denial, self-denial. And just denial of reality, denial of the way things were. It's just rampant. For families who lean entirely on religion for their security and meaning, the creation of fantasy well-being becomes critical and omnipresent. A child who tries to say that the emperor has no clothes doesn't stand a chance. I thought that was really good. Yep. I don't know that I need to say anything more to that. That was really good. I don't have a comment there.
Yeah.
Okay. So from there, I there's another part of this book that talks about healing your inner child. Yes. And we're talking about inner child work, and this is something I have been wanting to talk about. Mm-hmm. Just because the concept has always been a little bit foreign to me. Yeah. But I've also, now that I've read it, I've gone through a lot of that. There's a lot of that religion has you deny yourself, has you deny your inner child, which is interesting because it wants you to act like a child, but then deny your inner child.
but not treat that child in a nurturing way.
Not in a nurturing way.
That child to navigate the world effectively without religion. Right. I think that's ultimately what's happening.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Absolutely what's happening. Yeah. Absolutely what's happening. And so I've done some inner child work in a sense that I have allowed that child to come back out and start living again and not put it in the corner. Put myself in the corner. I wanted to read this. Okay. The injury to your inner child will depend on the teachings you received from your family and your religious community. In general, the impact of rigid religion creates a denial of self. Yeah. This can mean serious problems in developing emotional awareness and expression, acceptance of bodily functions and sexuality, intellectual reasoning abilities, the things we've been talking about, and decision-making capability. All the things we've mentioned here. Yeah. An easy way to evaluate these qualities in yourself is to consider the traits of a natural, healthy child and to compare them with your own traits. I think of a child as having basic trust and security, free and easy expression of feelings, curiosity, creativity, ability to give and receive affection, energy, eagerness, confidence, honesty, social ability, humor, and playfulness. Particular beliefs such as basic sinfulness and threat of hell, and approaches to life like black and white thinking, and avoidance of personal responsibility can be devastating to the healthy development of your core self. I do want to say this. Yeah. First of all, the threat of hell is so big in the church that I came from. Mm-hmm. Now, what they call fire and brimstone preachers and preachers that are saying, you're going to hell, they would say, oh, we don't do that. God is love. But there's always this undertone. Right, it's there. It's there. And it's this, you accept God's love or you go to hell. Right. That's now, another, we were talking before, like the master class and like misdirection, right? It's yeah. We're all about love, faith, like those things. It's like, well, if you only talk about those, but we know you also believe this. We know you also believe this. Yes, very much that. Mm-hmm. There's also this, it was one of the things about religion that really became evident to me. It was even becoming a revelation as I was in the church. This idea that God is all loving, all love. God is the greatest embodiment of love. But if you deny God's love, you're going to hell. If you were,
right. Mm-hmm.
Because the church is God's bride.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
If you had a husband that said, I love you unconditionally, I am the ultimate form of love, but if you deny my love, I will send you to eternal torture. Right. Would you want to marry that person? Mm. Would you want to be with that person? Right. Would you want to be involved at all with that kind of person? It's a little bit psychotic, isn't it?
Yeah.
And yet that's the God of the Bible is the one that says, you better believe me. You better go get that message out, because if they don't accept my love, they're all going to go be forever in torture and pain and burning fire. Or now they've tried to soften it. It's just the void of separation from God for all eternity.
That's the Mormon way of like, it's not like he doesn't want you with him. You won't want to be with him because you'll feel dirty in his presence. So it's actually merciful. That's the, yes, that helps, but it doesn't.
When I was growing up, it was, there is a heaven and a hell.
Yeah.
And if you're going, and that's the way I understood it as a kid. Mm-hmm. And either you're going to heaven or you're going to hell.
Yeah, but that does something to a kid.
Right? Like it's traumatizing. It's called child abuse.
Well, yeah, and Carl Rogers is an old. I'm not even going to try. I haven't been in grad school for a few years, so I can't tell you exactly how he connects to everything. But I'm pretty sure he was a student of Freud. If not, he was a contemporary.
Okay.
And he started his own idea that was very much separated, because Freud's very like, we have very base instincts that are troubling and bad that we have to like get on top of. Like, that's like the Freud.
Yeah.
And this guy, Carl Rogers, was much more, it's called person-centered therapy. That is much more like, people are actually good, and if we just get them into an environment that is validating, they will naturally go towards self-actualization.
Yes.
It's his idea.
Yes.
And he introduced the idea of like conditions of worth, and the idea that when we're born without any conditions of worth, right? So we believe we deserve like to be like attended to because we exist, and that's it. But then as we grow, we are like, conditions are put on top of that, right? That in order to do this, or to get this, I have to do this, right? The love that I get is not based on nothing.
Right.
And that's a huge one that can come to you from religion is like these, or like, that's like almost like a negative. Right? I once again been out of grad school, but there's like forms of reinforcement, right? But it's the idea that if you don't do something, you're going to hell, and it can just,
and it's this idea
really disconnecting.
I mean, it may be part of a quote that I'm about to read here, but there is a thing that it does to you. You're taught in religion that you just being yourself is not enough. Mm-hmm. And so, because you're born a sinner, you are born fallen. So whoever you are naturally is not enough. You have to be redeemed to be enough.
Right. And then God fills in the holes, and that's his grace. That's his glory. Yeah.
So again, this degradation of self is very damaging to your inner child and your core self.
Right.
The black and white thinking.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't. But even so, when I'm talking here in these talks, I'm thinking of trying to think from the perspective of someone who might still be in the church, or how I was thinking when I was in the church.
Right.
This where these ideas might be new, because black and white thinking, of course, that's all over the church.
Yeah.
It's right or wrong. There is no gray area. There's no room for nuance.
God
and
said it or he didn't. Right?
And they teach you that nuance is wrong, is sinful. Gray areas are sinful.
Right. Go back to the certainty, right?
Yes, you have to be certain.
You have to know.
Yes,
like
yes.
If you don't, you're whatever.
You're waffling. You don't have enough faith.
Yep. God
if you're not certain enough.
Lukewarm water or whatever.
Yes. Even worse than saying no or yes is saying I don't know.
Yeah.
Which
100%,
is which is really harmful because saying I don't know is such a huge part of the human experience.
Yeah. It's almost like you decide now, do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Like and decide on faulty fact, on faulty logic and just because I said so.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Again. So black and white thinking and avoidance of personal. Okay. So approaches to life like black and white thinking and avoidance to personal responsibility can be devastating to the healthy development of your core self. If you have experienced these things, your inner child is hurt. You need to acknowledge this hurt to your inner child. This may seem like a small thing, but the effect can be powerful. A simple analogy is that of a small child coming to show you a cut on her finger. Mm-hmm. When you say, yes, I see that cut. It looks like it must really hurt. She feels accepted. Her pain is honored and she is strengthened. She can run off to play again. You can begin the process of healing by giving your inner child the gift of understanding by saying, yes, I see what happened to you. You were really hurt.
Yeah.
And this would be people who have come out of religion, who have been hurt by religion, who have been damaged. It's just, it's important to heal your inner child by accessing your inner child and then acknowledging and then accepting as well.
Right. Yeah. I think the inner child's perspective is one that I also like turned away from for a while because it felt like too like peak therapy.
Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it's a little bit like,
it's like too much. It's like, I can't be that guy. I can't be sitting.
I don't need all that inner child.
I can't sit in my sweater, talk about inner child. I can't be that guy. Not yet. You know what I mean?
Therapist George with his cardigan and his tie.
Right? Yeah, too much. Yeah. But when I actually looked at it, I connected with it a lot as like even just like a paradigm or perspective to view your internal experience and view your emotional experience too, because that's ultimately like I think she describes it in this book, and I'll say like the inner child work and like incorporating that into like a therapy, that's still something I'm like researching and like feeling out and like introducing into my own work. So yeah, definitely still like studying and trying to understand it, but I really like the perspective it gives of just like really breaking it down of your feeling self, and like those feelings is more that inner child, because when we're children, going back to like that conditions of worth idea even as well, like work at the complete whim of our emotions, right? Like a baby is just completely responding to stimulus and feeling, like that's all that's happening. And then as we're reared, we're given and like socialized into our thinking self, which is that inner adult, right? And we're socialized to respond to our emotions in certain ways, to shove them down, to discredit them, to put them out of the way. And then as we move through life, whether we pay attention or not, we replicate the models that were given to us in our internal experience between those two warring forces. So our thinking selves often ends up doing what we were shown to do with our feeling self or with that child, right? And that's what inner child work is helping you do, is to start to deal with yourself how you would deal with like an innocent child, and start to allow those emotions to express, to validate them, to then make decisions based off of them rather than either shoving them down or reacting mindlessly to them.
Amazing. Amazing. Yes, that.
And I think go ahead though, sorry.
No, go ahead. What was your thought?
I don't have one. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, this is the last quote that I wanted to talk about. To put what you're saying there. Yeah. I have also been as I've been reading this book and I've been going through this book, the inner child part has really been important to me.
Yeah.
It's been powerful in accessing when I'm meditating.
Yes. Do you do the meditations that she outlines? Have you done them?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. In a sense, I have done meditation like that already.
Yeah.
So I understand where she's going with it. And I understand what she's doing.
They're very they're very like imagery driven. Like you're imagining you're kind of you're putting yourself into a glen with your inner child. Like what are they doing? Are they curious? Can you join with them?
Right.
It's just a very meditative way to like connect with that energy.
Yeah. And it's great. And it's just a way to connect with your core self.
Yes.
Because the inner child is basically your core self.
Yeah.
It's who you are. It's that purest you that's in there. And the one that you're told to look away from or deny in religion, even though it's not explicitly stated like that, that's what you're told to do. Or that's how you're taught. And there's so much catharsis and acceptance of self, healing that comes from that. It's powerful. It's more powerful than any religious ceremony, I'll tell you that. So this last one I goes right off that. It says, a positive sense of self is essential for mental health. So this is a problem that I saw in the church, was how toxic religion was making people's mental health. I was watching it around me. I saw a very stark example with my own mentor and his repression of sexuality, of his own sexuality, and his inability to face it and cope with it. And then it came out in very toxic ways, vis-a-vis my own the grooming of me.
Right.
And then when I was 18, telling me he was in love with me. That's the toxic, because he's repressed his sexuality so much that it had to come out this way.
Oh yeah.
And I don't mean to just put him on blast, but it's just such a big part of my life.
Yeah.
Such a big part of my story coming up through religion, that I got to see such a stark example in front of me and experience a stark example in front of me of how toxic this religion is, how toxic repression of sexuality is, how toxic repression of self is.
Yeah.
And I did not want to be that.
Right.
I did not want to end up that way. I did not want to end up living that life, that mental life. It was not genuine. And when I looked around at people in leadership, as I was in church leadership, I just didn't feel like that there was a depth there, that there was a genuine connection with self and a genuine joy and expression of self. It was very much this, we've got to put on the thing.
Yeah.
And that was not real connection. That was not real life with people.
No, I think like, it's a positive concept of self. Is that what it says?
Yeah, yes. Positive sense of self.
Sense of self, right? Like, how do you do that when you're being taught that you're nothing without God, right? Or that you can't have one. We're dirt without God, right?
That around every corner is sin. That every day in your everyday life even can be sin. Yeah. You're going to constantly need forgiveness from God.
That you're fallen. I think you mentioned that earlier. Original sin.
Did you want to say something, Haley?
All these messages.
Say it loud.
They tell you that the natural man, right, is evil and an enemy to God.
Yes.
So if you're naturally evil and you're constantly in danger of doing wrong things, constantly being guilted and shamed about not reading your scriptures, not praying, just like little dumb things, right? You're constantly told you're not worthy, you're not, like, you need to do better, you need to repent, you need to whatever. So how can you like yourself at your core?
You can't. Yeah. You can't.
Right.
You absolutely can't. It makes it impossible. Because you're nothing without God. So then essentially you are nothing.
Yeah.
And that's hugely damaging to your mental health. And I saw that. It started to become real to me.
Yeah.
And I couldn't be a part of that anymore. It goes on to say, followers of fundamentalist Christianity achieve this vicariously through the goodness and forgiveness of God. So this positive sense of self, because I'm good with God, God makes me good, I can like myself.
Yes. I remember journaling things about that of like, I don't even know how I would, it's like, as long as I can know that what I'm doing is good for God, then I can find like a sense of peace, right? Like whatever it was, like when I was like on my mission and things, I remember like that sentiment, right?
Yeah.
Of like, I don't have to feel good.
Yeah.
I just have to know that like it's God.
Yeah.
Like godly. Yeah. Or whatever. And that, yeah. So I think it was a Band-Aid over like that disconnection from myself and that like self-hatred.
Yep. And it says, but now you are faced with this issue directly. Although you may want to love and respect yourself, you are probably carrying some old negative assumptions about who you are and what you are like. This is one of the most insidious outcomes of conservative Christian teaching. Even though you were taught that God is love and Jesus is the good shepherd, you could never be loved unconditionally. This is what I was talking about. You were not okay just as you were, but were intrinsically bad, weak, needy, and incomplete. Yeah. All due to events that happened long ago before you existed, of course. Right. You were saddled with original sin before you even had a chance. The significant aspect of the damage to self in this system is the sense of shame. Yeah. And this is shame. Getting rid of shame in my life because I had been taught to shame myself. Yes. So thoroughly. It's so, I have to face it and I have to accept it, of course, because that's the mentally healthy thing to do. But just to think of the amount of shame that I was told to have for myself, it feels so disgusting. Yeah. Because I don't deserve that. You don't deserve that. We don't deserve that as humans, that type of shame. No, absolutely not. It's so damaging and so wrong. It feels so wrong now. I'm better than that. I'm worth more than that. I'm worth more than that shame. And I'm more valuable than that. And ew, it just feels ew. Yeah. It feels so ew. And if you love somebody, if you really love somebody, you don't want them to feel that shame about themselves. You don't want them to be shaming themselves. How it would feel so disgusting to watch someone do themselves, and yet it's taught and cheered on. Oh yeah, in religion, and that's not love. Right. To me, that's not love. Yeah. You can decide what love is for yourself, but that to me, that is absolutely not love. Yeah. If you're looking at someone shame themselves and you're encouraging it and you're doing it to yourself too, that's not love. This is in contrast to guilt, which refers to behavior or feeling bad because of what you have done. Guilt is a different thing. Right. Guilt is the thing that of course you're going to feel guilt. If you hurt somebody, you should feel guilty for that. Of course. Shame is feeling bad for who you are. Shame is feeling bad because you are a human and you are born, like she said, weak and needy and sinful. And that is wrong. That's what's wrong. This feeling can last long past the time you leave your religion. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Wow.
Wow. Yeah, I think as you're going through that, something that keeps coming to my mind recently when we're like having our talks, I keep thinking of just like it's really easy to, and even going back to like the video we talked at the beginning, it's really easy to propose answers to questions that you right? And so
how so? Can you give me an example? I'm
so even in that, right? The idea that the idea that turning to God for peace after you yourself feel incomplete and gross, all those things, but then you turn to God and then he like is a solvent for that. Right, he like brings you that peace. Like what I was saying before, right? Is that I would start when I wasn't feeling good. I would just need to think like if I'm doing what God believes or what is right, then I'm good. Okay. But the question that was put before that answer is the fact that I'm a fallen person that's not good enough, right?
Yes,
that doesn't exist. But if you create that, it goes back to saying that so Jesus is the answer, right?
To the problem that we created, which is original sin.
Exactly. Jesus is the answer. And I'm like, okay, I can see how you can say Jesus is the answer to us needing to be redeemed. But if we don't need to be redeemed, there's no answer.
There's no need to be answered. Yes.
And so
God made the problem.
Right. You introduce this problem that we're not good enough for God. Of course, sure, God is the answer to that, but that's not a legitimate thing.
What were you going to say?
Such a gaslighter, Jesus.
Yeah. Exactly. That's what I'm saying. For sure. It's this idea that sure. And I think what I'm trying to say is I can see how. Not even see. I experienced it. I would find peace in God during those times.
Yeah.
Right. But I didn't need that peace because the unrest I was feeling was based on truths that were not real, right?
Yes,
so I think that's what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, I'm like, okay, these answers are there.
Yeah.
I see how people turn to them, and I believe people get peace from them, but the things they're getting peace from oft times are being created in order
by
for them
the religion.
To need that peace,
to need the religion. Yes.
And even from the inner child versus inner adult idea, and turning to your core self, right? Is I think looking at those things you're subconsciously carrying, and it takes a lot of work, but looking at those and trying to find where is the faulty belief that is leading to that? How can I address that in addition to finding things that actually help me find peace rather than God that doesn't.
Yeah. And what I saw was just how it was not a solution. The solution that Christianity was giving to the sinful self was not a solution.
No.
First of all, it's a problem that it created.
Right.
But then it was not making people healthy and well.
Yeah.
It was making them have to keep coming back and begging for forgiveness. And keeping people prostrate, submissive, and in this lesser than position to need God.
Yeah.
And that's gross to me. That is so gross to me. It talk about a bad taste in your mouth.
Right.
To do that to people's psyche.
Right.
Now, I want to finish this off by saying a lot of the people they mean good, but they were taught so much this way of thinking that
100%.
And then they perpetuate this, and it's perpetuated for generations and generations.
The systems are the problem.
The systems are the problem. I have the problem with God. I have the problem with the religion. I have the problem with the Jesus of the Bible and the God of the Bible. That's where my problem lies. The people now there are predators and charlatans and people who take advantage of that, and I would say I've seen plenty of them.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are really well-meaning, and they think that this is the answer, and they think that living your life struggling like this is good, godly, and an answer.
Yeah.
And you don't have to struggle.
100%. Yeah.
You don't have to live your life viewing yourself that way.
Yeah.
Being in that type of low view of yourself.
Right. But
lift yourself up. And it's seen as sinful. It was seen as sinful. If anybody had any self-confidence, it was pride.
Yeah.
That's pride. That is wrong. Tear that person down. They're so prideful because they have confidence in themselves or because they had a high esteem of themselves.
Yeah. And
Ew.
Yeah. I'll add too, I think too, you don't have to do that, and you can continue to emulate the values that you feel that's helping you unlock.
Yes,
right?
Of course.
You don't have to degrade yourself to degrade humanity in order to then help
have
the
love,
sick, to have love, all
have
that
care,
stuff.
have empathy, have compassion.
Right. You can love yourself. You can be void of shame and still want to put good into the world and have a value that leads you to do that. That's out there.
I love the healing words of RuPaul.
Oh yes, please. Grace us.
If you can't love yourself, how the hell are you gonna love anybody else?
Right.
And she says that every episode of Drag Race, but how powerful that statement is, because you are taught not to love yourself in religion, and taught to give out from this empty place of I'm only lovable because God makes me lovable.
Yeah.
And then your intention of good is telling people you're only lovable because God thinks you're lovable, because God makes you lovable. You're not lovable as you are without God.
Yeah.
And so it just perpetuates this toxic nature. So, and it's seen so, like I said, any self-love is seen as pride and wrong. Any self-investment, any self-assurance and confidence. But if you can't love yourself, how the hell are you going to love anybody else?
Amen.
How the hell are you going to spread love around if you don't come from a full place of self-love? And it can't be seen as wrong. It's got to be seen as the essential first step. Go ahead.
But also, like, how do you know how to give unconditional love to other people?
Yes.
When you don't experience it from religion.
Yeah.
Like, they tell you it is, right?
They tell you that this is unconditional love, yes.
But it's not, because you have to do X, Y, and Z. Right?
Yes, to get it.
As worthy. And so I just, are you able to give a pure love to others?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Not have conditions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's all you've ever known. You know?
Amen. Well, this was an adjustment of what I thought unconditional love really was when I came out of religion. Jesus, the idea that Jesus and God were representative of unconditional love, I thought, and altruism.
Right.
And I had to re-examine that and realize that it's defined very differently if you want to go down a route of what actual unconditional love and altruism are. Creating a problem, blaming your creation for that problem, and then sending them to hell is not unconditional love.
No.
Is not altruism. No. I'm sorry. Casting them out of Eden and making them suffer because they ate the fruit from the tree you told them not to is so stupid. Child cancer because Eve ate from a tree. Right. Is abuse, child abuse. We need to end on a help us with a positive note, George. It's on you.
Recommendations? Did you want to do any recommendations? I know we have this.
Well, once again, Leaving the Fold by Marlene Winell is a recommendation. Do you have any other ones that you would like to give? Give me one, a therapist one. Come on, George.
No, just in the idea of rebuilding, reconstruction, moving forward boldly into the world without faith, without their morality. One of my favorite approaches to therapy I use a lot is acceptance commitment therapy based on cognitive behavioral therapy or CBT, but it adds in some mindfulness that I really like. And also one of its major things is this idea of values. And it's the idea that in order to even if you're coming to therapy necessarily, even just in your life, you can do this on your own. Put me out of business, but you can when you're trying to determine a change needs to happen, one of the first things to start that can be very helpful is to define your values, right? And then identify which of those values are not being met, that are being threatened, that are not being nurtured, whatever that looks like.
Okay.
And so they have acceptance. It's on, just look up acceptance commitment therapy card sort, values card sort or something like that. Okay. And it's just a list of different values adventure,
that you can go down. That you can. And you can decide which ones are important to you.
Right. You do an exercise where you you choose your top 10 and you break down your top 5 to your top 3. Do you
want to give a few of your tops?
I haven't done it in a while. I don't know the last time I did. Maybe we could do it. And share.
Maybe we can do it.
It's just something I'd recommend. If you are, so maybe starting a faith deconstruction and you're really fearful of that morality, kind of lie that's told that without religion you won't have any of that, anything. I think it's a really good practice to like tune into like what is important to you.
Yes.
And then that's just like a great place to then like move forward boldly from, because then you have this sense of clarity. So
amen.
That's something I do with clients pretty often.
Okay.
Like I said, I haven't done it in a little while, but maybe it's time.
Yeah. Okay. We can talk about that. That sounds great. All right. Well,
cool.
I would say that was pretty in-depth and thorough.
Good. Yeah. Good stuff. Well, we're going to be talking more about leaving the fold. We'll talk more about inner child work. I think it's very ingrained with this, especially if you like were raised in a religion and like have come out. I think it's huge. So not intense. The last time we'll touch on it, but
I really want to get Haley on the mic.
Yeah, Haley's
soon.
up.
So
more so.
We'll get Haley's story.
Voice.
Yeah, we'll get Haley's story. I really want to talk about sexuality and sexual repression is a big one. Christianity's basically based off of that.
That's one of their things.
It's one of their whole things that is a whole thing.
We got a lot to talk about.
Yeah, we do. So until next time,
this has been
I lost my faith and all I got was this podcast.
Yeah, 100%.
Nailed it.